Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. Trust broken between blood relatives leaves wounds that never fully heal. That cold Tuesday evening, I discovered just how fragile family bonds can be. My name is Loretta Johnson. For 35 years, I worked as a nurse at Atlanta Memorial, bringing babies into the world and comforting the dying as they left it. Now at 64, my hands show every IV I've placed and every tear I've wiped away. These same hands raised my two children, mostly alone, after their father Charles died of a sudden heart attack 17 years ago. That night, standing in my kitchen, I could almost feel Charles beside me as I pulled sweet potato pies from the oven. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the air, wrapping around me like an old friend. 6 pies cooling on wire racks for Pastor Miller's church fundraiser tomorrow. My contribution never changed, and nobody complained. "Charles, these turned out just right," I whispered to the empty room. The kitchen clock read 8:15 p.m. when I realized I'd forgotten whipped cream. Such a small thing to trigger the collapse of everything I thought I knew about my family. I grabbed my car keys and light jacket. October nights in Georgia can carry a chill that sneaks into your bones when you're not looking. The street lights had just flickered on as I backed out of my driveway, casting long yellow pools across the asphalt. My children were the anchor of my world. Tobias, my firstborn, took after his father, serious, methodical, responsible to his core. After Charles died, 15-year-old Tobias started wearing his father's watch, too big for his wrist then. He never took it off. Now at 32, he'd become a respected accountant with a corner office and clients who trusted him with millions. Danielle was my wild child. 11 when her father died, she processed grief differently, through laughter that sometimes seemed too loud, through risks that made my heart race. She dropped out of college after 2 years, breaking my heart, but finding her way eventually through a small event planning business that suited her creative spirit. Different as night and day, those two. But they were all I had. The grocery store was 5 minutes away, but to get there, I passed through Maple Creek subdivision where Danielle had brought her starter home last year. I didn't plan to stop, just a quick detour to avoid the traffic light construction on Main Street. That's when I saw it. Tobias's sleek black Infiniti parked in front of Danielle's modest brick ranch. The car gleamed under the streetlight, impossible to miss. I slowed down, confused. Tobias had called me that morning, apologetic. "Sorry, Ma, can't make dinner tomorrow. Big audit at work. I'll be there until midnight all week." But there was his car. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as something cold settled in my stomach. Why would he lie about working late? Why was he at Danielle's without telling me? And why did I suddenly feel like an outsider in my own family? I pulled over 3 houses down, turned off my headlights, and sat in darkness. My children hadn't been on good terms lately. 2 Sundays ago, dinner had ended with Tobias storming out before dessert, face tight with anger after Danielle laughed off his questions about repaying the $5,000 he'd loaned her. "It's just money," she had said. "It's just respect," he had replied before slamming the door. Now here they were meeting secretly. I should have driven to the store, should have minded my own business, should have trusted my grown children to handle their own affairs. Instead, I opened my car door. Before you judge me, ask yourself, what would you do if you sensed your family splitting apart, if you felt a truth being hidden from you, if the 2 people you loved most in this world were keeping secrets? I walked toward Danielle's house, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The grass was still damp from earlier rain, soaking through my thin shoes. Light spilled from Danielle's front window, the one that never closed properly, no matter how many times I reminded her to get it fixed. As I approached, voices carried through the night air. Raised voices. I shouldn't listen. I knew that. but mothers develop instincts over decades that don't easily shut off. I stepped closer, hidden by the shadow of the oak tree in her front yard, and what I heard through that window shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. If you've ever discovered a devastating truth about someone you love, hit subscribe now. Family betrayals like this one happen every day, and understanding the warning signs could save your heart from breaking beyond repair. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. The oak tree's shadow concealed me as I edged closer to Danielle's window. Cold air brushed against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I pressed my back against the rough bark, my nurse's instinct to stay hidden while observing kicking in. Through the partially open window, the yellow glow of Danielle's living room lamp spilled out. The scent of her signature vanilla candles mixed with something else, tension that seemed to thicken the air itself. "This isn't a joke, Danielle," Tobias's voice came through, tight and controlled. "You've crossed the line." I held my breath, straining to hear over the distant sound of a neighbor's television and the soft rustle of leaves above me. Danielle's voice shot back, higher than normal. "I didn't cross anything, Tobias. You just don't want to admit you're being unfair." "Unfair?" My son's voice rose sharply, then dropped to something darker. "You took something that wasn't yours. Do you know how serious this is?" My heart stuttered. Took something? What had my daughter done? I shifted slightly, the dampness from the grass now seeping through my socks. Part of me wanted to walk away. This was their business. But the other part, the mother who had watched them grow from helpless infants, couldn't move. Daniel's voice trembled slightly. "I needed it more than you did, and if Mama found out, she'd side with me." My name in their argument froze me in place. Side with her about what? What wouldn't I know? "If you don't fix this before the weekend," Tobias said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that carried perfectly through the night air. "I swear, Danielle, I'll go straight to her. And then the police." Police? The word hit me like a physical blow. My children, my babies, and the police? What had happened in their lives that had brought us here? A loud thud made me jump. Something slammed against wood. "You wouldn't dare!" Danielle hissed, fear threading through her defiance. "Try me," Tobias growled back. The room went silent, except for heavy breathing. I pressed my palm against my mouth, afraid they'd hear my own ragged breaths. I'd stood in this same spot years ago when Danielle was 16 and trying to sneak a boy out her window past curfew. I'd caught them with a flashlight and grounding. But we're not talking about teenage rebellion anymore. Whatever this was between my children involved something taken, something serious enough for police. Their silence stretched until finally Tobias spoke again, his voice drained of emotion. "You have until Friday. After that, I'm done protecting you." Protecting her from what? "You're just like Dad, Danielle," she shot back, her voice breaking. "Always thinking you know what's right for everyone." "Dad would be ashamed of what you've done," Tobias replied so softly I almost missed it. Another long silence followed, punctuated only by what sounded like quiet crying. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding so hard I worried they might hear it. Questions tumbled through my mind like clothes in a dryer, spinning fast, impossible to sort out. What did Danielle take? Why was Tobias threatening police? Why were they keeping me in the dark? My foot connected with the garden gnome, sending it toppling with a soft thud. I froze, holding my breath. "Did you hear something?" Danielle's voice came through the window. "Probably just a raccoon." "Where are you keeping it?" "Danielle, I told you it's safe. No one will find it." I crept back to my car, shaking. My trip to the grocery store forgotten. I drove home in a daze. Gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles ached. That night, I barely slept. The look of betrayal on Charles's face when he discovered his own brother had embezzled money from their business flickered in my dreams. The memory felt like a warning. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't confront them immediately.
I'd watch and wait and see if my children would tell me the truth on their own. But one thing was certain: I wouldn't let whatever this was destroy my family, not after everything we'd survived together.
Sunday arrived with golden autumn sunshine that belied the darkness swirling inside me. 5 days had passed since I'd stood beneath Danielle's window, and I'd heard nothing from either of my children that explained what I'd overheard. I spent the morning cooking like it was any other Sunday: smothered pork chops simmering in gravy, mac and cheese bubbling with 4 different cheeses, collard greens with smoked turkey necks, and cornbread with honey butter melting on top. The familiar rhythms of chopping, stirring, and tasting offered comfort when my mind kept racing toward the worst conclusions. At 3 p.m. sharp, my doorbell rang. Danielle arrived first, a bottle of sweet tea in one hand and forced cheerfulness painted across her face. "Smells amazing in here, Mama," she said, kissing my cheek. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which darted around the kitchen like she was looking for something or someone. "Tobias running late?" she asked, too casually. I shrugged, keeping my voice light. "You know your brother, punctual to a fault." Right on cue, the front door opened. Tobias always used his key. "Ma," he called out, "something smells incredible." When he entered the kitchen, I watched them carefully. Tobias nodded at Danielle, a tight gesture that contained none of the easy affection they once shared. Danielle's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "How's the audit going?" she asked him. "Fine," he replied, moving to the sink to wash his hands, his back to her. "How's business?" she said, the word coming too quickly. "Got 3 new clients this week." Lies filling my kitchen like smoke, making it hard to breathe. We sat down to eat, and I noticed how Tobias served himself less than usual, how Danielle pushed food around her plate more than eating it. The tension between them stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight. I decided to test the waters. "So, Tobias, did you manage to finish that audit Tuesday night?" I asked, keeping my eyes on my plate. His fork paused halfway to his mouth for just a second, just long enough for Danielle's fork to slip against her plate with a sharp clatter. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Long night." Danielle suddenly became very interested in picking a non-existent piece of lint off of her sleeve. "That's funny," I said, cutting a piece of pork chop. "I could have sworn I saw your car over on Maple Creek that evening." The silence that followed was deafening. "Must have been someone else with the same model," Tobias said, finally, his voice careful. "Those infinities are pretty common." Danielle reached for her water glass, her hand trembling slightly. I let them think I'd accepted the lie, changing the subject to church gossip and community news. They both relaxed visibly, exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. After dessert, peach cobbler that neither of them finished, Danielle excused herself to use the bathroom. I cornered Tobias in the kitchen as he rinsed dishes. "Son," I said quietly, "were you at your sister's house Tuesday?" He looked at me sharply, then softened, shoulders dropping an inch. "Why?" "I saw your car there," I said simply. "I just want to know what's going on between you two." He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Ma," he said finally, "it's complicated. Just give me a few days, okay? I'll handle it." The way he said it, like he was protecting me from something ugly, made my stomach clench. "You can tell me anything," I reminded him, "whatever it is."
His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw the 15-year-old boy who'd stood at his father's funeral trying so hard to be the man of the house. "I know, Ma, but some things—" He swallowed hard. "Some things you shouldn't have to deal with." When Danielle returned, her eyes were red-rimmed. She left soon after, claiming a headache. Tobias stayed only 15 more minutes, checking his watch repeatedly. As I cleaned up alone, the weight of their secrets settled on my shoulders. Whatever storm was coming, it would hit us all, and I needed to be ready.
Tuesday morning found me folding laundry when my doorbell chimed. Evelyn Parker stood on my porch, her round face pinched with worry, arms laden with donation bags. "Morning, Loretta," she said, stepping inside. "I brought those clothes for the church drive." Evelyn and I had been friends for 23 years, since our children were in Sunday school together. She worked as the church secretary and knew everything that happened within those walls, sometimes before Pastor Miller himself. "You're an angel," I said, taking the bags. "Let me put on some coffee." As the coffee brewed, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, Evelyn settled at my table. Her fingers drummed nervously against the wood. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on those shoulders," I said, setting a steaming mug in front of her. "Everything okay?" She wrapped her hands around the mug, shaking her head slowly. "Girl, you won't believe what happened at the community center," she said, lowering her voice like we weren't alone in my house. "Somebody took the entire scholarship fund, over $20,000, from the lock safe. Pastor's losing his mind." My teacup froze halfway to my lips. The scholarship fund, money raised through bake sales, car washes, and donations over the past 6 months. Money meant to send deserving kids from our neighborhood to college. Sacred money. "When?" I managed to ask, setting my cup down before my shaking hands could betray me. "Must have been sometime last week," Evelyn said. "Pastor only discovered it yesterday when he went to deposit the final donations before the committee meeting." A coldness spread through my chest as Tuesday night's overheard conversation suddenly gained terrible context. "You took something that wasn't yours. If you don't fix this before the weekend, I'll go straight to her, and then the police." Oh, God. "They think it was an outsider?" I asked, praying she'd say yes. Evelyn hesitated, adding more sugar to her coffee. "Well, the only ones with access are Pastor, the treasurer, and the event coordinator for the fundraiser last month. And the treasurer is your Tobias, right?" The room tilted slightly. Yes, Tobias was the church treasurer, had been for 3 years. And Danielle? Danielle had coordinated the fundraiser gala that brought in the final $7,000 for the scholarship fund. My children, both with access to that money. "Loretta, are you okay?" Evelyn's voice seemed to come from far away. "You've gone white as a sheet." I forced myself back to the present, pasting on a reassuring smile. "Just surprised," I said. "That safe is supposed to be secure." "That's what's so strange. No forced entry. Whoever took it had the combination." The combination that Tobias would have as treasurer. The combination that Danielle might have learned while working on the fundraiser. "Has Pastor called the police?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not yet. He's giving it until the end of the week to see if it was just a misunderstanding." Evelyn sighed. "But between you and me, that money's gone, and somebody's going to pay." We talked a while longer about church matters, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that night under Danielle's window, seeing new meaning in every word. After Evelyn left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the ticking of the wall clock Charles had hung 20 years ago, marking the passing of seconds as the full picture emerged with horrifying clarity. My daughter had stolen from the church scholarship fund. My son had discovered her theft. He'd given her until Friday to return the money. Friday had passed, and now, instead of going to college, deserving kids from our community would get nothing because of my daughter's actions. I thought of the single mothers who donated from paychecks they could barely stretch, of the elderly members who'd contributed Social Security money they could ill afford to part with. All that sacrifice, Stolen. My hands gripped the edge of the table as grief turned to determination. If what I suspected was true, this went beyond family loyalty. This was about right and wrong, about consequences. I glanced at the clock. 9:30. Danielle wouldn't be at her office yet. I needed answers directly from my daughter. Not half-truths, not evasions. I needed to look my child in the eyes and hear from her own lips whether she'd betrayed not just her brother's trust, but the entire community's. I grabbed my car keys, my heart hardening with each step toward the door. A mother's love runs deep, but there are lines that once crossed change everything. As I pulled out of the driveway, I wondered, can you love someone and still hold them accountable for terrible choices? Can family survive the kind of betrayal I feared I was about to confirm? By nightfall, I would have my answer. I didn't confront Danielle that morning. Something told me to wait, to let the knowledge settle into my bones first. I spent the day moving through my routine like a ghost, watering plants, paying bills, making phone calls. But my mind kept returning to my children, to money missing from a locked safe, to secrets whispered through an open window. By nightfall, my patience had run thin. The digital clock on my dashboard read 11:42 p.m. when I pulled onto Danielle's street. A light still glowed from her living room window. My daughter had always been a night owl. The moon hung heavy overhead as I walked the path to her door. Each step felt weighted, like walking through water. This wasn't a casual visit for sweet tea and gossip. This was a reckoning. I knocked softly 3 times. Through the door, I heard movement, then silence. I knocked again, more firmly. The door opened a crack, revealing Danielle's face, eyes puffy, hair pulled into a messy knot. Recognition flickered across her features, followed immediately by alarm. "Mama? What are you doing here so late? Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." Her living room looked different from how it had on Sunday. Papers scattered across the coffee table, empty coffee mugs collecting on side tables, a blanket rumpled on the couch like she'd been sleeping there instead of her bed. "You want some tea?" she asked, fidgeting with the hem of her oversized t-shirt. "No," I said, settling into the armchair by the window, the same window I had stood beneath a week ago. "I want the truth." Danielle froze, a deer caught in headlights. "About what?" I took a deep breath, meeting her eyes directly. "Danielle, did you take the scholarship money from the community center?" The question hung between us, sharp and unavoidable. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, then closed it. In that moment of hesitation, I already had my answer. I was going to put it back," she finally whispered, her voice thin and brittle. "I just needed a little time." The confirmation hit harder than I expected. Even though I'd suspected, even though the evidence pointed nowhere else, hearing my daughter admit theft knocked the air from my lungs. I gripped the arms of the chair, steadying myself. "Danielle, do you realize what you've done? That money was for children." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. "Mama, my business was drowning. The bank wouldn't give me another loan. 3 clients canceled last month, and my office lease doubled." The words tumbled out, desperate. "I thought I could use the scholarship money just for a week, book some new clients, make the money back, and return it before anyone noticed. But Tobias found out," I said softly. She nodded, sinking onto the couch. "He came by to drop off some tax forms. He saw bank statements on my desk, transfers I couldn't explain.
She wrapped her arms around herself. He was so angry, Mama. I've never seen him like that. $20,000, Danielle? From the church. You betrayed the church. You betrayed your brother and me. She sobbed then, shoulders shaking. I never meant to hurt anyone. Please don't tell the police. Tobias said he would give me until Friday to fix it. This Friday? Yes, she whispered. 2 days from now. I moved to the coffee table, pushing aside papers to see what she'd been working on. Loan applications, credit card statements, event proposals, desperate attempts to gather money she didn't have. How much have you raised? I asked. Almost 7,000, she said, wiping her nose with her sleeve. I sold my car this morning and some jewelry, and I've been calling every client I know, offering discounts for advance payments. The magnitude of what she'd done, what she stood to lose, crashed down on me. My daughter, facing theft charges, prison possibly, her business, her reputation, her future gone. What were you thinking, Danielle? The question escaped me, raw with pain. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but suddenly clear. I was thinking that I couldn't fail again. Not after dropping out of college, not after every time Tobias succeeded and I didn't. I was drowning, Mama. The money was there, and I convinced myself it was just borrowing. That's not how the law sees it, or the church. I know that now, but by the time I realized how wrong I was, it was too late. I'd spent some of it on rent and suppliers. The rest, I invested it in a client event that was supposed to bring big returns. The client backed out last minute. I closed my eyes, trying to process it all. My daughter, my child who I taught right from wrong, who'd attended church every Sunday of her life, had stolen from the very community that helped raise her. Does anyone else know? I asked. Just Tobias? And now you. She leaned forward, gripping my hands. Mama, please help me. I don't know what to do. I pulled my hands away, not ready to offer comfort. You put it back, every penny. That's what you do. I'm trying. Tears filled her eyes again, but I don't have enough, and time's running out. Tobias said if I don't have it all by Friday, he's going to Pastor Miller and then the police. And he's right to do so, I said, the words tasting bitter. Even if that means your daughter goes to jail? The question hung in the air between us, heavy as lead. I stood up, suddenly needing distance. Even then, I said softly, because I raised you better than this, Danielle, and you know it. As I turned to leave, she called after me, voice small and broken. Mama, what would Dad say? I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. He'd say what I'm saying. Find a way to make this right or face the consequences. Driving home in the dark, tears finally came, hot and angry, blurring the empty road ahead. My daughter was a thief, my son her accuser, and I their mother, caught between justice and mercy. Sleep didn't come that night.
The next morning, I called Tobias at his office. His assistant put me on hold twice before his deep voice came through the line. Ma, everything okay? We need to talk, I said, not over the phone. A pause. I have meetings until 6. Cancel them, I replied. This is family. He arrived at my house an hour later, still wearing his charcoal suit, his father's watch gleaming on his wrist. As a boy, he'd swim in that suit jacket. Now it fit him perfectly. When had my son grown into this man I sometimes barely recognized? He knew immediately from my expression. You know, he said simply, setting his briefcase by the door. I nodded, motioning him to sit at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd bandaged his skimmed knees, helped with homework, taught him to balance a checkbook. Danielle confessed, I said, pouring us both coffee neither of us would drink. Last night. Tobias loosened his tie, sighing heavily. I told her to come clean to you weeks ago. She refused. Weeks? The cup nearly slipped from my hand. How long have you known? He rubbed his temples, suddenly looking exhausted. Since the fundraiser, I noticed discrepancies in the deposit records. Cash that was counted that night never made it to the bank. His jaw tightened. I checked the security logs. Only 2 people accessed the safe that weekend, me and Danielle. And you confronted her. Not right away, he admitted. I followed the money first. Transfers to her business account, then payments to vendors, then a large sum to that event planner from Savannah. He looked up, eyes haunted. I wanted to be wrong, Ma. I wanted there to be another explanation. I reached across the table, touching his hand. For all his suits and success, this was still my boy. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because, he hesitated, because I thought I could handle it, make her return it without involving you or the church, protect the family. There it was, the burden my son had carried since his father's death. Protector, provider, perfect. It's not your job to protect me from the truth, I said gently. No, his shoulders slumped slightly. But it is my job to protect the church's finances, Ma. I'm the treasurer. Those numbers, that trust, it's my responsibility. He looked up, and I saw fear behind his anger. If this comes out, it's not just Danielle who looks bad. It's me, too. How did I miss it? Why didn't I have better controls in place? Understanding dawned. This wasn't just about Danielle's crime. It was about Tobias's reputation, the foundation of his entire career. Your clients, I said softly. If they found out, an accountant who can't even keep church money safe? He laughed bitterly. Yeah, that would go over great. 15 years building a reputation, gone overnight. So what's your plan? I asked. Friday's the deadline you gave her. She returns every penny, or I tell Pastor Miller everything. And if she can't? Her expression hardened. Then she faces consequences like anyone else would. She's your sister, I reminded him, and that should earn her special treatment. He stood abruptly, pacing my small kitchen. She stole from children, Ma, from families with nothing, from elderly folks who donated Social Security checks. I watched him move, the righteous anger radiating off him in waves. So, like Charles, moral clarity with no room for gray. I'm not saying what she did was right, I said carefully, but throwing your sister to the wolves? It's not the wolves. It's justice. It's what Dad would have done. I fell silent because he wasn't wrong. Charles had pressed charges against his own brother for financial misconduct. Family loyalty ended where moral failure began. That's what he'd always believed. Tobias stopped pacing, bracing his hands on the counter. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. I've tried to help her, Ma. I offered to loan her the money to replace what she took if she'd sign a contract to pay me back. She refused. This surprised me. Why? Pride, maybe? Or she knows she couldn't repay me either. I noticed something then. The way his shoulders curved inward, the shadows under his eyes. This wasn't just anger. It was hurt. You love your sister, I said. Not a question. Of course I do. He turned, eyes shining. Why do you think this is killing me? I've spent my whole life trying to protect her, bail her out, clean up her messes, but I can't fix this, Ma, if she won't let me. The afternoon light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes that danced between us. My son stood there, torn between family loyalty and moral obligation, and I had no easy answers to offer him. What happens Friday? I asked finally. Pastor Miller has called a special board meeting. The missing funds will be discussed. His eyes met mine. I have to report what I know, Ma. My conscience won't let me do anything else. even if it destroys your sister, your relationship? His face tightened with pain. Even then, some lines can't be uncrossed. As he gathered his things to leave, I saw the weight he carried. Duty and love at war within him. At the door, he paused. I never wanted to be in this position, he said quietly, to choose between my sister and what's right. I touched his cheek, this son who'd grown up too fast. I know, I whispered, but by tomorrow night, the choice will be made. He nodded, the finality of Friday's deadline hanging between us. Like a guillotine blade. Friday arrived with gray skies and a chill that seeped through windows and under doors. I'd barely slept the past 2 nights, my mind racing with calculations. How to help Danielle without enabling her, how to support Tobias without betraying my daughter. At 6:15 a.m., my phone rang. Danielle's ringtone. Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely? A choice that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. Mama, she sobbed without preamble, the client deal fell through. I don't have the money. My stomach plummeted. How much are you short? Almost 13,000, she whispered. I've sold everything I can, borrowed from friends. It's not enough. I closed my eyes, mental calculations running. My retirement account held just over 19,000, nearly all I had besides my modest pension. I could withdraw it, pay the penalty. Mama, her voice broke. Are you still there? I'm here, I said softly. The meeting, what time is it? 7 tonight. Tobias texted me. He wants me there. Of course he did. My righteous son, ensuring his sister faced the music in person. I'll see you there, I said, my decision already half formed. The church community center looked different that evening. Shadows deeper, silence heavier. Pastor Miller had gathered the board members in the small conference room. Himself, Evelyn, Deacon Washington, Sister Taylor, and Brother Reynolds. Tobias sat stiffly at one end of the table, manila folders arranged precisely before him. When Danielle walked in behind me, her face ashen, eyes red-rimmed, the temperature room seemed to drop. She wore a simple black dress, funeral attire, perhaps fitting for the death of her reputation. Thank you all for coming, Pastor Miller began, his gentle voice grave. As you know, we've discovered a serious discrepancy in the scholarship fund. Before we determine next steps, I've asked Tobias, as our treasurer, to present his findings. My son stood, professional mask firmly in place. Only I noticed how his fingers trembled slightly when he opened the top folder. 2 weeks ago, I discovered that $20,000 was missing from the scholarship fund. He began. His eyes avoided Danielle's. The money was transferred electronically on April 15th to an external account. He passed copies of bank statements around the table. The transfer was highlighted in yellow, stark evidence of my daughter's crime. The funds were traced to their destination, Tobias continued, voice flat. They were transferred to an account belonging to Johnson Events, LLC. A collective gasp filled the room. All eyes turned to Danielle, who stared at her folded hands. Pastor's face fell. Danielle, is this true? She nodded, unable to speak. The funds were subsequently used for business expenses and an event investment that failed to materialize, Tobias continued, mechanical now. This constitutes theft, misappropriation of funds, and breach of trust. The words fell like stones in the silent room. Pastor shook his head sadly. Danielle, this is serious. Those funds were meant for scholarships. Children are counting on that money. I know, she whispered. I was wrong, terribly wrong. We'll have to involve the police, Deacon Washington said firmly.
The church can't just absorb a loss like this. Danielle's shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. Before we take that step, Tobias said, adjusting his tie, there's something else I need to disclose. I looked up sharply. This wasn't in any conversation we'd had. After discovering the initial theft, I attempted to cover the shortfall temporarily by transferring $5,000 from the building maintenance fund to the scholarship account without authorization. The room fell deadly silent. Even Danielle looked up in shock. My intention, Tobias said, voice wavering slightly, was to mask the discrepancy while I investigated, then replace the funds discreetly once they were recovered. I was wrong to do so. He placed another document on the table, a bank transfer with his signature. I've already replaced that $5,000 from my personal funds with interest, he added quickly, but the board should know that I compromised my fiduciary responsibility. I stared at my son, understanding washing over me. He tried to protect Danielle, even while condemning her actions. He'd risked his own reputation to buy her time. Pastor Miller looked stricken. Tobias, this is unexpected. I take full responsibility, Tobias said firmly. If Danielle is reported to the authorities, I should face consequences as well. The board members exchanged troubled glances. One theft was bad enough, but their trusted treasurer had also moved money improperly. The scandal would rock our entire church community. The full $20,000 must be returned, Pastor finally said. There's no way around that. I have about $7,000, Danielle admitted. That's all I could raise. Sister Taylor sighed heavily. Not nearly enough. Deacon Washington nodded grimly. I move that we contact the police first thing Monday morning. Both incidents must be reported. My children, both my children, facing criminal charges? The room swam before my eyes. Wait, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. What if the money was returned in full tonight? All eyes turned to me. Loretta, Pastor said gently, that's $20,000. I'm aware of the amount, but I'm asking if it were returned tonight, would the board consider the matter resolved, without police? A long pause followed, as the board members looked at each other. The church's purpose is redemption, Pastor said slowly. If full restitution were made, Brother Reynolds, our head deacon, nodded. I could accept that solution. Hope flickered in Danielle's eyes, confusion in Tobias's. Ma, what are you saying? I straightened my shoulders. I'm saying give us the weekend. Until Monday morning, if the full amount isn't returned by then, proceed as you must. After a brief discussion, the board agreed. We had until 9 a.m. Monday to produce $20,000, or both my children would face legal consequences. As we walked to the parking lot afterward, Tobias gripped my arm. Ma, what are you planning? You can't possibly have that kind of money. I patted his hand. You're not the only one with secrets, son. But the truth was, I didn't have a plan. Just a desperate mother's determination to protect her children, even from their own terrible choices. What I didn't know then was that the worst was yet to come, and that by Monday morning, every secret in our family would be dragged into the light. If you've ever discovered that the people closest to you had hidden sides you never suspected, hit that like button. And if you're wondering how a mother can possibly save two children who've both crossed lines they shouldn't have, subscribe now, because what happens next will show you exactly how far a mother's love will go. Saturday morning arrived with no miracle solution in sight. I had emptied my savings account, counted emergency cash hidden in my jewelry box, even considered selling my wedding ring. Altogether, nowhere near enough. The weekend stretched before us like a tightrope, with no safety net. I was sorting through old financial papers, searching for forgotten assets, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marianne Fletcher, my friend from high school who'd worked at First Georgia Bank for 30 years. "Loretta," she said after pleasantries, her voice oddly hesitant, "I'm calling about something unusual I noticed." I set down the papers. "What is it?" "Did you authorize a joint account with your kids? There's been some activity that triggered our security protocols." My pulse quickened. "What joint account?" "An account under your name, Tobias's, and Danielle's was opened 2 years ago." She paused. "It's had some strange transactions lately. Large transfers in and out." I gripped the phone tighter. "I never opened any joint account." "That's what I thought," Marianne replied. "The paperwork has your signature, but when I saw the recent activity, something felt off." She lowered her voice. "Normally I can't discuss this, Loretta, but given our history—" "I understand," I assured her. "Can I come in today?" "Sure, I'll be here until noon. Ask for me at the desk." 40 minutes later, I sat across from Marianne in her small office as she pulled up account details on her computer screen. "It was opened 26 months ago," she explained, turning the monitor so I could see. "An initial deposit of $5,000 from Tobias Johnson." The account showed regular monthly deposits ranging from $500 to $1,000, all from Tobias, accumulating steadily until the balance reached just over $22,000 last month. "Then this happened," Marianne said, pointing to a series of recent transactions. "A deposit of $20,000 last month, followed by withdrawals totaling about the same amount, leaving the original balance virtually untouched." I stared at the dates. The $20,000 deposit matched exactly when the scholarship money went missing. "Who made these transactions?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marianne clicked through several screens. The recent deposit was an electronic transfer initiated by Danielle Johnson. The withdrawals were mostly cash, also by Danielle. "My daughter had moved the stolen money into this account, an account I never knew existed. Why?" "Marianne," I said slowly, reaching for her hand, "you mentioned my signature on the paperwork. Can I see it?" She pulled a file, sliding a document across the desk. There was indeed my signature, but it wasn't mine. Close, but the loops in the L were wrong. Someone had forged my name. "Thank you," I said, mind racing. "I need to speak with my son about this." I called Tobias immediately. 20 minutes later, he met me at a coffee shop down the street, still wearing running clothes, face flushed. "What's going on?" he asked, sliding into the booth. I pushed a printout of the account across the table. "Explain this." He glanced at the paper, then his face went completely still, the kind of stillness that comes before a confession. "You weren't supposed to find out yet," he said quietly. "Find out what? That you forged my signature? That you and Danielle have a secret account?" His eyes widened. "Danielle? What does she have to do with this?" I said, "She's been moving money in and out of this account, the scholarship money." Tobias looked genuinely shocked. "That's impossible. She doesn't have access to this account." "The bank records say otherwise." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "She shouldn't have access. This was supposed to be a surprise." "What surprise justifies forgery?" He took a deep breath, shoulders slumping. "The house on Magnolia Street, the one you always talked about." I froze. The little craftsman with the wraparound porch and stained glass windows, the one Charles and I had admired when we were newlyweds, promising someday we'd buy it when it came on the market. The house I still walk past sometimes, imagining a life that never happened. "It's for sale again now," Tobias continued softly. "First time in 15 years. I've been saving to buy it for you as a surprise for your 65th birthday next year." The world tilted beneath me. My son had been secretly saving for 2 years to fulfill a dream I'd mentioned in passing, a dream his father never lived to make real. The account needed your name for the property purchase, he explained, but I wanted it to be a surprise. So he looked down, I signed your name. I know it was wrong. Tears pricked my eyes. But how did Danielle get access? He said, she must have found the paperwork at my place last month when she helped me move furniture. She saw the account statements. The full picture crystallized with horrifying clarity. Danielle had stolen the scholarship money, then discovered Tobias's secret account and used it to hide her theft temporarily, thinking she could return the money before anyone noticed. She'd not only stolen from the church, she had exploited her brother's loving gesture to cover her tracks. Tobias, I whispered, reaching for his hand. I don't know what to say. Nothing to say, he replied, voice tight with emotion. The house is gone now. That money has to go back to the church. But your savings, he finished, were meant for you anyway. At least this way, they'll help keep Danielle out of jail. His bitter laugh held no humor, though right now, I'm not sure she deserves it. I sat back, the cruelty of it all washing over me. My son's beautiful secret, a gift he'd been crafting for years, destroyed by my daughter's desperation. His sacrifice rendered meaningless. His dream for me, shattered. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to Danielle's apartment. She opened the door in pajamas despite the late morning hour, eyes widening at my expression. Mama, what's wrong? I said, the joint account with Tobias's house money. She crumbled. I was going to tell you. When? After you'd empty it completely? I didn't know what it was for, she protested weakly. I found statements at his place. I just needed somewhere to move the money temporarily. It was for a house, I said flatly, for me on Magnolia Street. Recognition flashed in her eyes. She knew the house, knew its significance. Oh, God, I had no idea, I replied. You never asked, you just took. She sank on the couch, face in her hands. I've ruined everything. Looking at my daughter, talented, beautiful Danielle, I felt something shift inside me. The maternal instinct to protect warred with a deeper need for accountability. Not everything, I said finally, but it's time you understood exactly what your actions have cost.
Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. The church board members gathered again in the community center conference room, faces solemn. Pastor Miller nodded as we entered, Tobias, Danielle, and me, a united front, despite the fractures between us. We're here to resolve the matter of the missing scholarship funds, Pastor began. Loretta, you asked for the weekend. What have you determined? I placed a certified check on the table. $20,000 as promised. Relief visibly swept through the room. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly in thanks. Deacon Cushington examined the check, then nodded. May I ask the source? Pastor Miller inquired gently. Tobias's personal savings and a small contribution from me. Sister Taylor looked at Tobias with new respect. That's quite a sacrifice, young man. He nodded once, face impassive. Only I knew what that money had really meant to him. Dreams reduced to numbers on a check. And Danielle, Pastor asked, what is your part in this resolution? She stepped forward, hands trembling slightly, but voice steady. The theft was my doing alone. I've signed an agreement to repay Tobias in full with interest. I've also dissolved my LLC and taken a position with Crawford Events as an assistant. My first paycheck, and all future ones, will go toward my debt until it's cleared. The board members exchanged glances, clearly surprised by this structured approach. There's more, Danielle continued. I've written personal apologies to every family who contributed to the scholarship fund, and I'll be volunteering with the youth program every Saturday for the next year, not as coordinator, just as a helper. Her humility wasn't feigned. The past 48 hours had transformed my daughter in ways I was still processing. As for Tobias, Pastor Miller said, your actions in temporarily moving funds without authorization were wrong, my son finished firmly. I've tendered my resignation as treasurer, effective immediately. Deacon Washington shook his head. That won't be necessary. Your attempt to protect the fund while misguided came from the right place. A 6-month probation seems more appropriate, with quarterly audits. The relief on Tobias's face was subtle but profound. His professional reputation outside the church remained intact, no small mercy. After some discussion, the board voted unanimously to accept our resolution. The money was returned, Danielle would face consequences without legal charges, and Tobias would remain treasurer under supervision. Afterward, we walked the parking lot, and Pastor Miller caught up with us. Forgiveness doesn't mean there weren't wrongs committed, but it does mean offering a path forward. He looked at Danielle. Remember that. She nodded, eyes downcast. The sunlight shone down on us all, family by blood, strangers by choice in this moment. Sunday dinner this week? I asked, hoping to bridge the chasm between us. Tobias checked his watch. I have plans. I'll be there, Danielle said quickly. Tobias's eyes met hers, the first direct look they'd shared in days. I need time, he said simply. She accepted this as part of her penance. As Tobias walked to his car, Danielle touched my arm. He'll never trust me again, will he? I watched my son's retreating figure. Trust isn't given back, Danielle. It's rebuilt, brick by brick. And if some bricks are missing forever, then you build around the gaps, but the structure can still stand. The hardest moment came later that day, when Tobias told Danielle directly, "You're my sister, and I love you, but you'll have to earn my trust again." And Danielle, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "I will." The promise hung between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. Sometimes in families, that's all you can ask for. In the weeks that followed, our dynamics shifted like furniture rearranged in a familiar room. Danielle worked double shifts, handing over most of her earnings to Tobias. He set up a repayment schedule, businesslike but fair. Sunday dinners resumed, quieter now, with careful conversations that avoided certain subjects. The scholarship fund was distributed as planned. 6 deserving children received college money that nearly vanished. I attended the award ceremony, watching Danielle serve punch in the background, humble work that carried its own dignity. One evening, I found Tobias on my porch swing, staring at nothing in particular. "The house on Magnolia sold," he said as I sat beside him. "I know. I saw the sign." We rocked in silence for a while. Then he said finally, "I'll start saving again. Different house, maybe, but the same idea." I squeezed his hand. The gift was knowing you wanted to, not the house itself. He nodded, understanding. We rocked a while longer, the creaking of the swing a familiar comfort. "She's trying," I said eventually. He nodded. "I know. I'm not there yet, but I'm moving in that direction." It was enough for now. The rest would come with time. Looking back, that night I saw Tobias's car at Danielle's house was the moment everything changed. I thought I was hearing a simple sibling argument. In reality, I was eavesdropping on the collapse of carefully constructed facades. My perfect son secretly forging my signature to create a beautiful surprise. My struggling daughter drowning in financial desperation, making a terrible choice. Both of them keeping parts of themselves hidden from me, from each other, from the world. 6 months have passed since that night. The scholarship fund has been replenished. Danielle has paid back almost a third of what she owes. Tobias has begun to smile again at family gatherings. Last Sunday, I watched them across the dinner table, heads bent together over Danielle's phone, laughing at something private. A small moment, but one that would have seemed impossible in those dark days after the truth emerged. The moral of this story is simple but profound. Family love doesn't excuse betrayal, but it can guide redemption. Secrets and shortcuts may seem harmless or necessary in the moment, but they can destroy what matters most if not faced with honesty. Tobias lost his dream of gifting me a house, but he gained a new strength. Danielle lost her business and independence, but she found humility. And I, as their mother, learned that love sometimes means facing the truth, no matter how painful. Because through that window, I didn't just hear a conversation. I heard the moment my family fractured and began the slow, difficult journey of healing. If you've ever had to rebuild trust in your family, hit subscribe. The road to reconciliation is never easy, but as this story shows, it's the journey that transforms us. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.